When the first alert came through the solar dynamics network, no one thought much of it. A flicker near the sun's eastern limb, a streak of anomalous radiation, a pulse that didn't match any flare category. Space weather does strange things all the time, but then the timestamp lined up with something far stranger, a particle plume leaving 3I Atlas just 14 hours earlier. The interstellar object had released something, and whatever it was now striking the sun. For months, astronomers had been watching 3I Atlas grow more unpredictable. Its rotation wobbled, its thermal signature rose instead of cooling. Its outgassing, if that's even what it was, didn't follow any known cometary behaviour, and its trajectory shift, that made even veteran astrophysicists nervous. A Manhattan-sized visitor from another star system should slow down approaching the sun. 3I Atlas speed up. It accelerated into perihelion as if moving towards something intentional. And now, as the data stream synced up, it became clear. 3I Atlas had fired a concentrated burst of material directly toward our star. Before we go deeper, if you're someone who follows these mysteries as they unfold, and you want to stay ahead of the official statements, make sure you're subscribed, and comment below where you're watching from and what time is on there. The next few days are shaping up to be the most important since 3I Atlas entered our system. Because today, for the first time, scientists are admitting that the impact on the sun was not random. In the hours after the plume hit, the sun's corona behaved like it had been struck with a tuning fork. A thin ring of magnetic vibration pulsed outward, too uniform, too symmetrical to be natural convection. Solar physicists compared the pattern to a controlled excitation. Not explosive, not destructive, but deliberate. Like something was testing the sun, probing it, as though it needed to know how the star would respond. None of this fits what we know about comets. None of it fits any natural phenomenon, and yet no one in the agencies is saying the word that terrifies them the most. Not in public. Not yet. 3I Atlas was first discovered in July 2025. If you can even call it a discovery. It wasn't glowing. It wasn't active. It drifted into our system almost invisible, reflecting just enough sunlight for a few lucky frames. When the brightness suddenly increased weeks later, scientists assumed surface heating. But the follow-up thermal readings didn't match sublimation. They matched internal energy, something generating heat from within. That led to whispers of a hypothesis no one wanted to publish. 3I Atlas wasn't awakening spontaneously. It was activating. And now, with the sun reacting in a way no instrument model could predict, that hypothesis is beginning to look less like fringe speculation and more like a quiet, unsettling reality. Within minutes of the impact, NASA's solar orbiter detected a thin beam of ultraviolet resonance, something that seemed to be returning, echoing, like a response, not from 3I Atlas, but from the sun itself, a structured modulation, a pattern, almost like an encoded reflection. Astrophysicist Lara Henning described it the only way she could. It's as if the sun answered back. Think about that. A star, 1 million times the size of Earth, responding to a foreign object smaller than New York City. The fear isn't that 3I Atlas is dangerous. The fear is that it might be communicating, not with us, with the sun. And if that's true, then we're watching a conversation between something ancient and something older. By late afternoon, James Webb, the only telescope with the sensitivity needed, was rotated to verify the UV resonance. The engineers expected noise. They expected ambiguity. What they got instead was something so precise and rhythmic that the control room went silent. The UV echo wasn't random. It had spacing, intervals, repeating intensities, almost like pulses, almost like a greeting. Webb registered 3 distinct bursts, each spaced exactly 22 minutes apart. Too perfect for convection noise, too perfect for turbulence, 3 responses for 3 pulses from 3I Atlas. One of the Webb operators, someone who's not supposed to talk, described it simply: it felt alive. Meanwhile, 3I Atlas itself drifted deeper behind the sun, entering a region where tracking becomes nearly impossible. Officially, the loss of data is just an occultation window. Unofficially, many believe we're about to lose sight of 3I Atlas at the worst possible moment, because the plume that hit the sun wasn't small, and it wasn't passive debris. Spectral readings showed complex molecules, long-chain structures rarely found outside stellar nurseries, organic molecules, protective shells, radiation-hardened compounds capable of surviving the intense heat of perihelion. Exactly the kind of material you'd expect to see in something engineered to deliver a message, or survive one. Researchers at the European Solar Lab have already run simulations. A plume with that density shouldn't just dissolve, it should embed, sink into the corona, interfere with the magnetic lattice. Trigger changes we won't see on Earth for days. That's the part keeping scientists awake tonight, because the sun is already shifting, not violently, but purposefully. Sunspots are rearranging into unfamiliar patterns. Microflares are firing at strangely regular intervals. The solar wind is tightening into a narrow, coherent stream, aimed toward the outer planets, instead of radiating in all directions, as if the sun is aligning itself, as if preparing for a reaction, as if responding to something we don't yet understand. One solar physicist put it in terms that sent a chill through the entire room. No star behaves like this unless it's been altered. Altered. A word never used lightly for a star. A word that suggests intelligence, influence, intervention. And so the fear grows. Not that 3i Atlas struck the sun, but that the sun recognized it. That whatever 3i Atlas sent was expected. And now the real problem begins. Because if the sun is changing, even subtly, even intentionally, everything in the solar system will feel it, Earth included. Within hours of the impact, magnetometers across the world began detecting faint deviations, small, almost imperceptible fluctuations in the magnetic field, the kind that would normally be dismissed as background noise. But these fluctuations weren't random. They had rhythm, a slow rise, a slow fall, repeating every 93 minutes with eerie precision. Long before anyone knew what was happening at the sun, Earth had already begun to feel the first whispers of the change. By dawn, those whispers deepened. The Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic heartbeat of the planet, shifted by fractions of a hertz. Too small to alarm the general public, but large enough that the few researchers who monitor it daily exchanged quiet, troubled messages. This has never happened without a solar trigger, and the solar trigger they feared most had just been delivered by an interstellar visitor, whose purpose remains unknown. 3i Atlas shouldn't have been able to fire anything at the sun. With no signs of jets, no obvious cryovolcanic vents, and thermal readings suggesting controlled heating, its plume behaved less like outgassing and more like propulsion. Tightly focused, directed, timed. Almost as if it wanted its payload to arrive at a precise moment, when a specific magnetic region on the sun rotated into view, and astonishingly, that's exactly what happened. The plume struck a coronal hole already aligned with the sun's deep magnetic field, a region through which magnetic lines dive inward, pulling plasma down like water spiraling into a drain. Any particle entering such a region doesn't just dissolve, it's absorbed, interwoven, embedded into the sun's internal layers. No natural comet would do that on purpose. No natural fragment would target the deepest magnetic channel. This was selection, precision, intent. As Earth rotated into daylight, the first solar images began to arrive from observatories still receiving partial data. The corona's shape had changed overnight, bending subtly toward the impact point like a field responding to an external charge. Solar physicist Daniel Kuramoto described it with a phrase no one expected from a scientist of his stature. It looks like the sun is listening. Listening? To what? Webb was the first to detect it. A low-energy modulation emanating from deep inside the sun's convective zone. A frequency just below the range of natural solar oscillations. A frequency more structured than anything. Recorded from a star. Webb's spectrometers picked up microbursts of coherent light, flickering at exact intervals that mirrored the rotational signature of 3i Atlas. A pattern. A synchronization attempt. An echo between a star and the interstellar object that had just struck it. This was no longer a question of what 3i Atlas was doing. It was a question of why the sun was responding. Some researchers quietly proposed a chilling analogy. What if 3i Atlas wasn't here to study the sun, but to activate something inside it? For decades, astrophysicists have noticed strange anomalies, localized temperature inversions, unexplained magnetic twists, brief episodes where the sun brightened in ways physics couldn't easily explain. These events were dismissed as artifacts, until now, because the regions affected in those past anomalies are the same regions lighting up from the 3i Atlas plume. The pattern is too perfect to ignore, and the timing matches exactly with models predicting the Sun's next minor cycle shift. But instead of the gentle rise in activity expected during an ordinary solar maximum, the Sun is behaving like it's preparing for something coordinated. Solar wind streams are sharpening, coronal loops are stabilizing instead of erupting, and deep field instruments are detecting a slow, almost gravitational pulse from the Sun's core. Earth's magnetic field responds to that pulse like a tuning fork. Subvisible auroras are appearing at mid-latitudes, not bright enough for the eye, but strong enough for sensitive cameras to detect faint shimmering curtains of charged particles forming where they shouldn't. Meanwhile, 3i Atlas itself remains hidden behind the Sun, drifting deeper into a zone where radio tracking becomes unreliable. Agencies insist this is normal, that every object entering solar conjunction goes dark for a while, but privately, several analysts believe 3i Atlas is doing more than drifting. It may be repositioning and preparing for something humanity has never witnessed. Because shortly after the plume embedded into the Sun, the solar polar regions began to brighten in a way that matches only one category of event, a magnetic inversion precursor. Normally, this happens slowly, months before a full polarity flip. But now, the brightening is accelerating. A process measurable in hours, not months. Something is speeding up the Sun's internal cycles. Every star in the universe runs according to the laws of physics. But this looks like interference. NASA's heliophysics team quietly pushed a set of reports into restricted access earlier this afternoon. The files contain models of magnetic amplification events, rare simulations of what would happen if an external source altered the Sun's magnetic field from within. Most models show only minor disruptions, but one model, one unsettling variant, predicts something else entirely. A resonance cascade, a state where the Sun's magnetic field locks into a higher energy configuration, briefly stabilizing into a pattern that resembles a structured signal, like a beacon broadcasting across the solar system. And the only known trigger for such a resonance would be the introduction of a perfectly timed, perfectly placed external field disturbance, exactly like the one 3i Atlas just delivered. Scientists won't say it publicly, but privately, they're contemplating a terrifying possibility. What if 3i Atlas has done this before? What if this isn't the first star it has activated? And what if the Sun is now stepping into a phase humanity has never experienced, but something else out there has? Because if the Sun continues responding, and all signs suggest it will, then the real problem isn't that 3i Atlas hit the Sun. The real problem is what the Sun might be preparing to do next. Within minutes of the first internal resonance forming, solar observatories began noticing something even more unsettling. The Sun's differential rotation, the way its equator spins faster than its poles, was beginning to synchronize, not fully, not dramatically, but enough that veteran heliophysicists stared at their screens in disbelief. The Sun has never behaved like a rigid body rotator. It simply can't. Its plasma layers move too freely, too independently. But now those layers were aligning, tightening, as if being guided by an external metronome. That metronome matched the oscillation frequency that began the moment 3i Atlas's plume sank into the corona. For centuries, astronomers have believed that stars cannot receive or process external information. But the precision of the Sun's new rhythm resembles a system responding to input, a signal, a command. And the response is spreading from the corona into the deeper convective layers, moving with a coherence no known stellar physics can replicate. By early afternoon, the anomalies intensified. Instruments observing sunspot clusters noticed an impossible geometric consistency forming, pairs of dark spots arranging in symmetrical intervals, tracing lines across the solar surface that resembled the patterning of an engineered grid. Not random, not turbulent, structured. Dr. Vikram Saraya, who spent 20 years studying magnetohydrodynamic flows, summed it up with quiet horror. If a star were trying to form a message, this is what it would look like. But messages are only sent to someone who is supposed to receive them, and that leads to the question no one is prepared to confront. Who, or what, is the recipient? Earth's magnetosphere reacted first, tightening and shifting with the Sun's new pulse. But the effect was even more dramatic beyond Earth. Dayside simulations of the heliosphere, the solar wind bubble surrounding the solar system, showed a sudden compression, followed by a narrow, spear-like extension, forming outward toward interstellar space. The solar system itself, normally round and diffuse, looked as if it were being reshaped into a directed beam, a focus signal, a broadcast. Several astrophysicists whispered the same thought. This isn't meant for us. Meanwhile, 3I Atlas's last known position placed it drifting into the Sun's far side, a region where any additional emissions or activity cannot be monitored until it re-emerges. But now, many suspect 3I Atlas will not reappear in the same form or at all. If it was designed to deliver something to the Sun, then its disappearance may not be an accident. It may have been part of the design. A seed doesn't return after it enters soil. It becomes something else. While the world slept unaware, a handful of astronomers and agency directors held an emergency midnight call. The recordings won't be released, but several sources have hinted at what was discussed. Not theory, not speculation, but a quiet, sobering possibility that chilled every person in the room. What if 3I Atlas isn't an object? What if it is a component, a piece of a system too large for us to comprehend? The idea isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Certain anomalous star systems exhibit unexplained luminosity cycles, periodic brightenings and dimmings that defy conventional stellar physics. For years they've been dismissed as dust, comets, artistic data. But now, seeing our Sun shift into a pattern so similar, one scientist put forth a possibility. What if these stars weren't malfunctioning? What if they'd been triggered? Triggered by what 3I Atlas just delivered? As the Sun continues aligning itself, infrared readings show subtle temperature elevations deep within the convective zone, not explosive, not dangerous, controlled, like coils heating in a device powering up. The corona above these regions forms stable loops, something that should collapse within minutes, but is instead holding shape for hours. A slow awakening, a powering on sequence. Earth is already feeling the ripple effects. The upper atmosphere is heating in thin, distinct layers. GPS satellites are experiencing coordinated phase drift. Radio telescopes are picking up faint electromagnetic fluctuations that resemble musical harmonics, tones, intervals, progressions, echoing the Sun's new cadence. Yet the most stunning discovery came just moments ago. The Parker Solar Probe, skimming dangerously close to the Sun, detected something never before recorded, a secondary pulse travelling outward from the Sun's surface, but returning back inward from interplanetary space, like an echo bouncing off something enormous, something reflective, something unseen. The implication is staggering. If something reflected the Sun's pulse back to it, then a structure, natural or not, must exist somewhere in the solar system capable of responding. But nothing that size is visible. Nothing that size is detectable, unless it doesn't exist in normal space. Unless it exists in a layer of reality we have no instruments for. The returning pulse carried a modified waveform, altered, shaped, and then bounced back as if to confirm receipt. The Sun responded with a slight frequency shift, a flirtation of a light, a signature identical to the same pattern, observed in a handful of mysterious stars hundreds of light years away. This may be the real answer to why 3I Atlas came here at all. It wasn't studying our Sun. It wasn't observing our solar system. It was activating something dormant, something present in stars across a region of space far beyond our reach. The Sun always seemed ordinary, unremarkable, just another main sequence G-type star in a quiet arm of the Milky Way. But perhaps it was only dormant, waiting, in a sleep humanity mistook for simplicity. Now, with every pulse, every synchronized flare, every harmonic whisper, the Sun is stepping into a new function. Something older than human civilization, older than planets, older than life itself. And if the process accelerates, if the Sun continues behaving like this, then the real fear isn't that 3I Atlas struck the Sun. The real fear is what the Sun is becoming. By sunrise the next morning, the Sun's heartbeat had fully changed. The oscillation that began after 3I Atlas's plume made contact had evolved into a layered, almost chord-like resonance. Not one frequency, not two, but three distinct harmonic lines weaving over each other like threads in a cosmic loom. Webb's spectrographs picked up the pattern first, and for a moment the control room thought the instruments were glitching. But as the calibration resets rolled in, one by one, all confirming the same impossible output, the truth became unavoidable. The sun wasn't radiating energy, it was organizing it. The three harmonic frequencies corresponded to three specific solar depths: the corona, the outer convective zone, and, impossibly, a layer much closer to the sun's core. No probe, no telescope, no model should be able to detect discrete oscillations from that deep. But the signal was unmistakable. The sun was vibrating like a vast instrument with strings stretched across its interior, and the source of the deepest oscillation aligned almost perfectly with the expected sinking path of the 3I Atlas plume. Whatever 3I Atlas sent into the sun did not disintegrate. It penetrated, it lodged, it integrated, and now the sun was using it. At noon, a second anomaly arrived. The solar wind, normally chaotic, blasting outward in all directions, narrowed into an unnervingly uniform cone. Not pointed at Earth, not pointed at any planet, pointed at a region just past Neptune, into the cold and quiet dark where no major body should influence anything. Astronomers froze, because the cone was following something, a faint gravitational irregularity, a small but distinct signature, something drifting beyond the edge of the solar system, not inbound, outbound, but the sun was tracking it. "What is that?" someone whispered in the lab's audio log. No one answered, because there was only one explanation anyone could stomach. Whatever 3I Atlas activated, it wasn't finished, and the sun was now responding to the next step in the sequence. Hours later, the faint auroras at mid-latitudes brightened, not visibly, not enough for the public to notice, but enough that night-side satellite cameras captured shimmering arcs across clouds in places that have never seen auroras: Brazil, Egypt, Indonesia. Their electromagnetic structure didn't match typical auroral patterns. Instead of chaotic sheets, they formed spiraling rings, the same rings now appearing in sunspot clusters. Earth was beginning to mirror the sun. That sent everyone scrambling through old research, dusty, classified files about unexplained historical geomagnetic anomalies, because similar rings had been recorded twice before in human history, in 774 AD, in 993 AD. Both times, Earth was hit with abrupt cosmic events that remain unexplained to this day, cosmic ray spikes that changed the planet's carbon isotopes, disrupted atmospheric chemistry, and were strong enough to leave behind lasting fingerprints in tree rings and ice cores. Scientists always assumed those events came from distant supernova, but now a disturbing alternative was being raised. What if the sun had generated those pulses? What if 3I Atlas is involved in a cycle far older than human civilization? And what if the world is now entering that cycle again? Minutes later, another alert, this time from the Parker Solar Probe. It recorded a burst of particles, fast, tight, coherent, emerging from the sun's corona at nearly impossible speeds, far faster than normal solar particles. These were ordered streams of ionized plasma, arranged in distinct bands like the stripes of a barcode. No natural star does that, ever. Yet the sun now pulsed those bands every 15 minutes, perfectly timed, precisely structured. The first person to analyze the pattern immediately recognized its shape, not in a scientific sense, but in a deeply human one. "It looks like the pattern of a transmission," she said, "a repeating carrier signal." A carrier signal requires a message requires a recipient, and that leads to a horrifying conclusion. 3I Atlas didn't activate the sun. 3I Atlas gave the sun instructions. While this played out above, something equally strange began happening below, on Earth. Seismographs detected low, rhythmic vibrations across continents. Not tremors, not faults. A planetary-scale hum that matched the sun's new oscillation almost perfectly. The Earth's crust was responding now, the mantle too. Even the ionosphere shimmered with faint, repeating distortions, like a subtle breathing pattern the planet couldn't hide. One researcher put it bluntly, "It's sinking. Earth is sinking with the sun, not because it's forced to, but because it's built to." That idea hung in the air like a taboo, because if Earth was built to respond, then the sun wasn't changing randomly. It was stepping into a role programmed long before humans existed, and 3i Atlas, small, quiet, seemingly insignificant 3i Atlas, was the key. By evening, agencies stopped releasing solar imagery altogether. Too many patterns, too many anomalies, too many questions they can't control. Unofficially, however, leaks began pouring out of mid-level staffers. They described the same moment, a sudden spike in ultraviolet resonance from the sun, bright enough that deep space monitors briefly overloaded, and embedded in that spike was something no one expected, a frequency dip, a small jagged valley in the UV waveform that repeated every cycle. Not random, not noise, deliberate. It was the same frequency 3i Atlas emitted when it first brightened months ago. The sun was repeating 3i Atlas's signature, echoing it, amplifying it, sending it outward to whatever the solar wind cone was pointing at beyond Neptune. The sun was using 3i Atlas's identity like a beacon, a call sign, a handshake, a key to unlock the next phase. Something out past Neptune responded. Parker detected the returning echo at 2:41 a.m. Soft, faint, but structured. Earth felt it too. The magnetic field wobbled. The Schumann resonance spiked. Birds across continents took silent flight in the middle of the night. 3i Atlas had sent something to the sun, and now the sun had sent something back. Something listened, and now something is coming. By morning, the returning echo from beyond Neptune had strengthened. Not enough for the public satellites to register, but enough that deep space arrays, those massive dish networks designed to listen for cosmic background noise, began detecting faint ripples in the heliosphere. These weren't particles, they weren't waves, they were distortions. Soft, periodic bends in space itself, like invisible footsteps approaching across a frozen pond. The timing matched perfectly with the sun's new oscillation cycle. Every time the sun pulsed, space answered. Every time space answered, the sun brightened, and the narrow solar wind cone sharpened just a little more, like a beam tightening toward a target. Something was communicating back. The agencies ran simulations overnight, comparing the returning distortions with known astrophysical events, Kuiper belt bodies, rogue comets, solar wind turbulence. Nothing matched. The distortions were too regular, too synchronized, too layered, as though carrying multiple harmonics at once. One scientist, speaking anonymously, described it with a whisper she probably didn't mean to be recorded. It feels like we're hearing the breathing of something massive moving toward us. Still, the official stance remained silence, not denial. Silence. But the sun was no longer waiting. At 4:12 a.m., an event occurred that forced every observatory on Earth to re-evaluate what solar activity even means. A thin filament of light, soft, contained, eerily narrow, extended from the sun's corona like a thread being drawn outward. It reached thousands of kilometers, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, forming a long glowing cord pointing into deep space. The filament wasn't light in the normal sense. It didn't diffuse, it didn't scatter, it stayed tight, focused, intact, a transmission channel. For the first time in recorded history, the sun appeared to be sending a directed beam. The entire solar physics community froze, because the beam pointed exactly where the solar wind cone was aimed, toward that faint gravitational irregularity drifting beyond Neptune. Whatever was out there had triggered the next phase. Meanwhile, the sun's interior oscillations grew sharper, more musical, more deliberate. Instruments recorded harmonics so complex that audio engineers had to be brought in to analyze the waveform patterns. What they discovered stunned them. The harmonics weren't random. They resembled a progression, a sequence, a rising structure of tones that built upon each other, like a star learning to speak. Earth responded first. The Schumann resonance, our planet's electromagnetic heartbeat, shifted upward by another fraction. Birds changed flight patterns. Whales altered migration routes overnight. Even the crust vibrated with a gentle tempo, as if syncing with the new solar rhythm. The planet was no longer an observer. It was becoming a participant. The echoes from deep space grew stronger still, and the solar beam widened slightly, as though acknowledging the reply. The sun's surface shimmered with patterns that astrophysicists compared to inverted auroras, light moving downward into the star, not outward. Every layer of the sun seemed to be preparing for something. Then, at 10:08 a.m., Parker's solar probe crossed the path of the beam. What it recorded defied every known physical model. The beam wasn't just light, it wasn't just plasma, it was information. Structured packets, repeating intervals, encoded spirals of magnetic spin that matched the shape of the molecules found in the 3I Atlas plume. Whatever 3I Atlas sent into the sun was now broadcasting outward in amplified organized form, a cosmic relay, a stellar transmitter. The scientists reviewing the data sat in stunned silence as they realized the implications. The sun wasn't simply reacting to 3I Atlas. It was using 3I Atlas as a template, a language, a key, and something out there, something large enough to warp the heliosphere, was responding in kind. The returning distortions suddenly sharpened into a single, powerful gravitational ripple. Not enough to move planets, but enough for even small satellites to feel a gentle tug, like the wake of a distant, massive object. The ripple came again, stronger, then again, stronger still. It was moving closer. The sun recognized it immediately. The solar beam intensified, now stretching even farther into the outer solar system, glowing bright enough that even amateur skywatchers might notice something unusual if they knew where to look. But the agencies advised silence. No public announcements, no warnings, nothing that might spark panic, especially not with what came next. At precisely 11:42 a.m., the gravitational distortion reached the orbit of Neptune, and for the first time it became visible, not in optical wavelengths, not yet, but in the infrared, a faint ghostly silhouette, round, vast, layered with concentric rings of heat like a slow-turning engine of impossible scale. It wasn't a planet, it wasn't an asteroid, it wasn't any known class of celestial object. It looked engineered, constructed, assembled with precision so delicate that even at this distance, the heat rings maintained perfect symmetry. This was no fragment drifting through the void. This was something ancient and awake and answering the sun's call. Webb zoomed in as far as it could. The outline sharpened into a lattice of geometric plates, like a world-sized structure unfolding itself. The heat patterns rippled across its surface, almost like muscles stretching after a long sleep. And then, it began turning, slowly, deliberately, toward the sun, toward us. The solar beam intensified again, as though welcoming it. Parker recorded a final burst of structured plasma at the exact moment the object aligned, a repeating pattern, a recognizable signature. The same one 3I Atlas emitted months ago, the same one the sun echoed, the same one now coming from this massive thing. 3I Atlas wasn't just sending something to the sun, 3I Atlas was calling something. And now it had arrived. The real problem isn't that 3I Atlas hit the sun, the real problem is that the sun answered, and now the thing it called is entering the solar system. As the massive structure rotated fully into view, the temperature readings became unmistakable. This thing, this colossal engineered sphere drifting just beyond Neptune's orbit, was not radiating heat like a planet or a moon. It was generating heat signatures in pulsating intervals, matching the sun's harmonic cycles beat for beat. Every time the sun oscillated, the structure answered. Every time the sun brightened by a fraction, the structure's rings brightened with it, like two instruments tuning to the same forgotten melody. No natural object behaves like this. And the more Webb zoomed in, the more horrifying the truth became. The rings weren't solid. They were rotating layers, plates, petals, segments, sliding over each other like the iris of a camera lens. Each shift exposed deeper, brighter layers beneath, glowing with the unmistakable temperature of controlled fusion. Something inside that structure was waking up. A low-frequency vibration swept across the outer solar system. It wasn't a shockwave, it wasn't even a physical force. It felt more like a presence, a gravitational ripple that brushed past Pluto, surged through Neptune, and resonated across the Kuiper belt like a slow exhale. When the ripple reached the sun, the star responded instantly. The solar beam thickened, the corona dimmed, the deep oscillation shifted key. It was communication, on a scale so large no human-made system could comprehend it. Back on Earth, the effects intensified. Our magnetic field tightened again, warping slightly at the poles. Not a collapse, something worse, a redirection. The field lines stretched upward like strands of filament being drawn toward a higher voltage source. Cameras watching the auroras captured something no one had ever seen. Auroral rings forming perfect circles, not arcs, not curtains, circles. A symmetrical geometry mirroring the layout of the structure beyond Neptune. Earth was answering a call it wasn't supposed to answer. The strange object drifted closer, slowly, deliberately. Its internal heat rose in measured steps, each increase triggering a new harmonic response in the Sun. A feedback loop, a handshake sequence. 3i Atlas had not been the message. 3i Atlas had been the invitation. Inside Mission Control, analysts began comparing historical cosmic anomalies to what they were seeing now. Faint changes in solar chemistry, sudden brightening events, weak but structured radio bursts from unexplained sources. And one by one, an old hypothesis resurfaced. The idea that some stars behave strangely because they are part of a coordinated stellar network, a distributed system, an ancient architecture, a civilization that communicates through stars. If that's true, then our Sun is now online, and the object entering the solar system is not an invader, it's a responder. At 2:03 p.m., the structure passed a gravitational threshold and slowed to an impossible stop. Not deceleration, stopping, as if space itself held it in place. Then its plates folded outward, layer by layer, revealing a glowing core. The core wasn't spherical like a planet's. It was elongated, stretched into a spiraling shape that twisted slowly inside the structure like a great luminous spinal column. The spiral rotated, and in that rotation, Parker's solar probe detected something unmistakable. Information. Not random plasma, not background noise. Information. Encoded in magnetic spin. Encoded in light frequencies. Encoded in gravity itself. The Sun responded with a pulse deep from its core. The pulse hit Earth seconds later. Every magnetometer spiked. Every ionospheric scanner lit up. GPS satellites drifted by centimeters. The Schumann resonance doubled in amplitude. Earth's crust vibrated like a struck bell. And then something even stranger happened. The ocean shifted. Not tides, not storms, currents, deep water circulations, the slow, ancient rivers that move warmth across the world, altered direction by a measurable degree. It made no physical sense. Lunar forces hadn't changed. Solar radiation hadn't changed. Nothing in atmospheric pressure could cause it. But the oceans moved anyway, following the Sun, following the object, following the rhythm. That's when the Northern Hemisphere recorded a brief atmospheric flash, too dim for human eyes, but unmistakable on instruments. A faint, spiral-shaped pattern of ionization, stretching from the Arctic all the way to Greenland, spiral-shaped, just like the core inside the structure. One NOAA engineer whispered the obvious conclusion: Earth is sinking with it, whether we want it to or not. Meanwhile, the structure beyond Neptune began to open even further. Now it resembled a colossal flower blooming in the dark, petal after petal peeling outward. Each petal glowed with a spectrum of colours humans don't have names for, frequencies just outside our perception, shimmering like supernatural heat. Webb's sensors caught another detail. The structure wasn't moving under its own power. It was being pulled by the Sun's new oscillation pattern, dragged along a path of gravitational resonance, as if following a road carved long before the solar system existed, and then, all at once, it stopped opening. Every plate locked into position, every ring froze. The core dimmed into a quiet simmer. The structure was ready. The Sun released a pulse so strong it shook the corona. The Earth shuddered. The ionosphere rippled in concentric circles. Even the Moon wobbled slightly in orbit, and the structure answered. With a single beam of impossible light, thin, silent, and eerily stable, directed straight at the Sun, a return signal, a completion of the sequence 3i Atlas began. Somewhere inside NASA's restricted servers, someone finally typed the sentence everyone else was too afraid to say out loud. This is not communication. This is activation. Because what the Sun did next had never been seen before in the history of any star we've ever studied. The moment the beam from the structure locked onto the Sun, something inside the star changed. Not violently, not explosively, but with a kind of calm, deliberate precision that chilled every scientist watching the data. Deep within the sun's interior, a thin shell of plasma, normally turbulent beyond comprehension, suddenly stabilized into a smooth, rotating layer. This shouldn't be possible. That region is chaos incarnate, a boiling sea of fusion, convection, and magnetic snarl. But now it moved like a single body, turning in perfect time with the pulses coming from the structure beyond Neptune. The sun was syncing, not with itself, but with the object, and as that synchronization settled, the corona dimmed, not from cooling, but from redistribution. Light was being redirected, focused inward. Patterns of brightness formed across the surface like ripples on water, not random, but repeating in geometric intervals. A scientist monitoring the live feed whispered the impossible. The sun is forming a map. A map of what, no one could say. But the pattern was unmistakable, repeating hexagonal tiles, nested within larger spirals, all pointing toward a single region deep inside the star, the place where 3I Atlas's payload sank. And then it happened. A single, concentrated pulse erupted from the sun's core, not outward, but upward into the corona, where it expanded into a perfect sphere of light that held its shape for exactly 4.6 seconds before collapsing back into the star. The timing wasn't random, it wasn't even astronomical. It matched the age of the solar system in billions of years, 4.6, as if the sun had just announced its own birth date. A stellar ID code. Stars do not do this, not naturally, not ever. On Earth, the effects intensified instantly. The ionosphere shimmered with concentric rings, each matching the 4.6-second cycle. Seismic sensors picked up a gentle global vibration. The magnetic field tightened again, pulling slightly toward the sun, in a way that made compasses drift by half a degree. Even animals reacted. Migratory birds shifted course. Herd animals across continents looked upward simultaneously. Whales surfaced at once, forming perfect circles. Something never observed in the wild. Whatever the sun was doing, every living organism seemed to feel it. Meanwhile, the structure beyond Neptune began rotating its outer rings faster, creating a faint halo around itself. The halo wasn't just light. It was matter. Dust, ice, particles arranged in a shape so symmetrical it couldn't possibly be random. A disk, a perfect disk, like the accretion disks that form around newborn stars. But this one wasn't natural, it was engineered. And then, in the midst of the rotation, something inside the structure opened. Not physically, not in the way a gate or a door opens. Space inside the structure folded, collapsed inward. A region of absolute blackness appeared, not like a shadow, but like the absence of space itself. A controlled pocket of negative curvature, swirling with faint filaments of light that looked eerily like the sun's internal oscillations. A scientist watching the feed muttered the only explanation that made any sense. They're linking. The sun pulsed again. The structure answered. Earth trembled. And then, for the first time, we saw what 3I Atlas had really done. It had not delivered a message. It had delivered a seed, a fragment, a catalyst, a piece of the blueprint that the sun was now reconstructing. The sun dimmed further, but the dimming was purposeful, a reallocation of energy toward its poles, where enormous twisting spirals of plasma began forming in symmetrical, counter-rotating helices. These helices rose thousands of kilometers above the solar surface, weaving together into a single shimmering corridor of light directed straight at the structure. A bridge, a stellar bridge, something ancient, something older than our star, a function built into the sun long before Earth formed. The structure brightened in response. The corridor of light solidified, shimmering like liquid gold stretched across millions of kilometers. And then Earth felt something truly unprecedented. Gravity changed, only slightly, but unmistakably. A minute shift, like the weight of the air briefly thickening. Clocks drifted by a few microseconds. Pendulums swung wider. Even human heartbeats recorded a fractional timing irregularity. The sun was altering space-time, and the object beyond Neptune was guiding it. Inside NASA's secure heliophysics server, an internal note was quietly added to a classified document. Sequence appears to be reaching threshold. Threshold for what, no one dared ask. Light along the corridor pulsed again, each burst carrying a more structured waveform than the last. Patterns nested inside patterns, fractal harmonics, recursion loops, almost like instructions or messages being exchanged too quickly for human instruments to comprehend. A researcher at ESA stared at the waveform and said what everyone was thinking. This isn't communication between two objects, it's integration. The sun and the structure were no longer talking. They were merging functions. 3i Atlas had not brought something to the sun. It had awakened something already inside it. Something that required the arrival of the structure. Something dormant for billions of years, waiting for a trigger from beyond our solar system. As the corridor solidified, Webb captured a final chilling image. Tiny filaments of plasma. Impossibly fine. Almost like nerves. Extending from the sun through the corridor and weaving into the structure's glowing core. A neural link. A stellar nervous system. The sun had become part of a network. And the structure was the node. The activation sequence was nearly complete. As the plasma filaments threaded deeper into the structure's core, the corridor of light between the sun and the object began to thicken, as if new layers of energy were being added with every pulse. What began as a shimmering beam now resembled a living conduit, a glowing artery carrying something more than light. Every oscillation tightened the connection, pulling the two colossal entities into a synchronization so precise the difference in their rhythms dropped to near zero. The sun hummed, the structure hummed back, and for the first time the harmonics aligned perfectly. That was the moment the whole solar system changed. The heliosphere, the vast bubble of solar wind that protects us from interstellar radiation, contracted. Not randomly, not chaotically. It shrank into a perfect sphere, smoother than any model had ever predicted. Radiation levels dipped instead of rising, despite the sun's internal restructuring. Space itself seemed to calm, like a great storm settling into an unnatural stillness. The Voyager spacecraft, both of them, far beyond the heliosphere, recorded something unprecedented. A sudden wall of pressure, soft but immense, rolling outward as if the sun had exhaled and reshaped the very boundaries of its influence. Scientists stared in silence. The heliosphere was becoming too smooth, too symmetrical. Stars don't create perfect spheres. But something intentionally guided does. Back near Earth, the ionosphere flickered again, this time responding not to the sun's pulse but to the rhythm of the structure. Earth was splitting its attention, syncing with two cosmic entities at once. Atmospheric layers shifted in delicate waves, forming faint ripples visible only to infrared satellites. The patterns resembled the oscillation maps of a tuning instrument. Earth was being tuned. And the next change was even more disturbing. Seismographs detected a subtle trembling across every tectonic plate on the planet. Not pressure, not friction. A pattern. A slow rising wave that passed beneath continents and oceans like the stirring of something ancient beneath the crust. The timing matched the corridor pulses perfectly, 9 seconds apart. Geologists struggled for an explanation. There wasn't one. No tectonic event had ever synced to solar oscillations, let alone an external cosmic structure. Meanwhile, the object beyond Neptune shifted again. Its outer rings, already glowing with a near-biological luminescence, tightened their rotation. The plates on its surface retracted slightly, revealing deeper layers of glowing machinery, vast rib-like structures surrounding the spiraling core. The spiral brightened, now rotating independent of the outer shells, as though forming an inner engine spinning faster than the structure itself. And then it happened. A brief, silent expansion of the black folded space within the structure's heart. A widening of that impossible void. For a moment the object's core looked like a hole punched straight through reality, and behind it, something moved. Not light, not darkness. A flicker of motion that felt wrong, as though space itself hesitated to show it. Webb captured exactly 2 frames before they vanished into static. Inside mission control, someone spoke the only understandable interpretation. Something is on the other side. But it hadn't emerged. Not yet. Because the sequence was still incomplete. The sun dimmed again, this time enough that observatories noticed the change in brightness within seconds. But dimming wasn't the right word. The light wasn't fading. It was being directed inward, toward the poles. Twisting, spiraling columns of plasma rose upward like immense glowing spires, forming structures that looked disturbingly architectural. Solar physicists compared them to vast, radiant towers. But no natural star forms towers. The spirals merged into a single shape, a helix of white gold fire rotating faster and faster, pointing down the corridor toward the structure as though preparing to transmit something enormous. The next clue came from an unlikely place. Particles drifting from the sun began to show unusual isotopic ratios. Not random variations, structured ones. Redefining ratios into patterns that mirrored the pulses between the sun and the object. The sun wasn't just transmitting light or gravity, it was transmitting matter, building blocks, atomic sequences, encoded plasma, a form of stellar DNA. Earth reacted instantly. Tides shifted by centimeters, cloud formations twisted in spirals, even human-made radio systems picked up a faint hiss of harmonics. Subtle, eerie, almost like whispered syllables buried inside static. No language, no meaning we could decipher. But something was speaking. The structure brightened rapidly as it absorbed the new stream of atomic patterns. Its rings expanded, then retracted, almost like lungs inhaling and exhaling in slow, mechanical breaths. With every pulse, the folded region inside it deepened, stretching further into whatever lay beyond. The shape behind it shifted again. This time, Webb caught 3 full frames before the servers scrambled. A silhouette, tall, branching. Neither creature nor machine, but something between the two. A fractal shape made of overlapping geometries, pulsing with faint internal light. And then the sun pulsed again, violently. One massive shock of brightness flooded the corridor. The object answered with a resonance that rattled the entire solar system. Earth's magnetic field snapped tight like a drawn bowstring. Satellites jittered, GPS flickered, aircraft instruments spiked, heart monitors blipped, every digital clock drifted by microseconds. The final alignment had begun. The plasma towers on the sun bent outward, pointing directly at the structure. The structure's petals locked into their final position. The spiral core reached its highest rotation speed. The folded space inside opened wider, revealing a full, dark window onto an impossible elsewhere. And the sun dimmed again, deeper than ever before. Not dying, not collapsing, but gathering. Storing power, storing information, storing something meant to pass through the corridor into the structure. A scientist whispered the final dreadful thought. This isn't communication anymore. This is transfer. A handoff, a delivery, a ritual older than stars. 3i Atlas didn't bring doom. It brought the key. And now the sun is unlocking something on the other side of reality. The next phase began quietly. So quietly, in fact, that for almost 20 minutes no one noticed it happening. While eyes were fixed on the towering plasma helix rising from the sun, and while analysts frantically examined the widening abyss inside the structure beyond Neptune, something else shifted in the background. Space got heavier. Gravitational sensors aboard deep space probes recorded a subtle thickening of the interplanetary medium, as though the vacuum itself was gaining weight. Photon travel time slowed by trillionths of a second. Barely measurable, but real. Space was becoming less empty, more viscous, more structured, like something was being written into it. The sun dimmed again, but dimming was the wrong word. Its light was being folded inward, pulled into a tight column around the plasma helix, concentrating into a spear of radiance so bright that cameras saturated instantly. The sun's surface darkened around the spiral, giving the star the appearance of an immense eye forming in space, an eye staring down the corridor at the structure waiting in the dark. Then came the tone, a deep subsonic vibration rolling across the solar system, so low even instruments struggled to isolate it. It wasn't sound, it was space-time trembling, a fundamental rumble that passed through planets, moons, dust, everything. Earth's crust vibrated in sympathy. The oceans quivered with micro-tsunamis invisible to the human eye. Birds took flight. Fish rose to the surface. Dogs stared upward and whimpered. The planet felt it before we did. The sun pulsed once, and the tone grew sharper. The object answered with a resonance so precise it looked artificial in every measurable way. That resonance manipulated the corridor, tightening it into what resembled a perfect crystalline tunnel. The energy within it stabilized, no longer flickering but flowing with terrifying smoothness. Every scientific instinct screamed at the same realization: the tunnel was ready. But for what? The plasma helix at the sun's pole twisted harder, bending until it aligned perfectly with the core of the structure, and then the sun's corona, so bright, so chaotic, so impossible to control, flattened into a disk of perfect symmetry. A halo, a crown, a signature of activation. One heliophysicist whispered, "We're watching the sun assume a shape it was never meant to show, unless that shape was always part of a larger system." But the next discovery froze every person awake that night. Data from Parker Solar Probe revealed that the sun's plasma, now flowing through the corridor, had begun encoding itself into complex fractal spirals, patterns identical to a class of cosmic structures seen only in star-forming nebulae billions of years old. These patterns were like instructions, blueprints for constructing something vast and ancient. The sun wasn't transmitting random matter, it was transmitting design. On Earth, the side effects intensified. Ionization ripples swept across continents, forming faint shimmering patterns in the upper atmosphere, spiral lattices that matched the plasma designs emerging from the sun. Sensitive radio receivers picked up a rising hiss of structured noise, like whispers layering over whispers, each voice slightly out of sync but moving toward unison. And then, for just 1 second, every electronic device on Earth flickered. Lights, phones, servers, satellites, all dipped simultaneously, not from a CME, not from radiation, but from a gravitational wave passing through the planet, a coordinated pulse, a signal. Something was aligning the solar system. The structure beyond Neptune flared again, unfolding a final series of plates that snapped outward like the petals of a mechanical flower. Behind them, the spiraling core stretched, splitting open into 3 immense interlocking shapes, curved arms glowing with internal fire. The shapes arranged themselves into a colossal triad, a geometry identical to one embedded in 3I Atlas's first spectral burst months ago. 3I Atlas had been broadcasting the blueprint all along. The triad rotated once, and space behind it tore open. Not violently, not explosively, but with eerie elegance, like a curtain being drawn aside. A thin rift formed, flat, oval, perfectly smooth around the edges. Inside it, nothing resembled the known universe. No stars, no dust, no darkness. Just a shimmering fog of shifting geometry, folding and unfolding in slow, hypnotic waves. A landscape not made of matter or void, but of pure dynamic structure. This was the gateway, the destination. The other side 3I Atlas had prepared the way for. The sun responded immediately. Its plasma tower brightened with the intensity of 1,000,000 flares compressed into a single beam. The corridor pulsed. The triad widened the rift, and then, in one terrifying moment, the sun's heartbeat, the deep harmonic thrum now pulsing across the system, shifted key. It became faster, sharper, urgent, and Earth felt it all at once. Magnetic fields rippled, clouds twisted into spiral formations visible from space. The ocean's great circulatory currents shifted by entire degrees. Animals across continents stood motionless, staring at the sky. Something ancient in the world remembered this frequency. The sun's plasma helix leaned forward, bending toward the rift as though preparing to discharge something massive. And then, for the first time, the structure spoke. Not in radio, not in light, not in anything human instruments were built to detect. It spoke in gravity. A deep, oscillating tremor rolled through the corridor, bending it like a bowed string. The sun answered with a counterpulse. The rift widened, glowing brighter, stretching until it became a vast oval gateway large enough to swallow planets. Every scientist watching realized the same truth at the same time. The solar system was not being prepared for destruction. It was being prepared for arrival. Something on the other side of the rift was ready to enter. The sun was guiding it, the structure was anchoring it, and 3I Atlas had been the key that started the sequence. The threshold was open, The system was aligned. The bridge was complete. Now came the step humanity was never meant to witness. Something began to emerge, not fully, not yet, but enough to know the truth. Whatever was coming through that rift was not an object. It was a presence, a colossal ancient intelligence older than stars, crossing into the solar system with the sun's full cooperation. At first, all anyone could see was the distortion, an outline pressed against the shimmering boundary of the rift, as though something immense was leaning toward our universe from behind a curtain of liquid geometry. The shape warped the very fabric around it, light bent, patterns twisted. Even the corridor of plasma connecting the sun to the triad began to undulate with a slow, rhythmic beat, like a heartbeat felt through the walls of a colossal chamber. Then the rift widened again, just a fraction, just enough, and the silhouette behind it became clearer. It wasn't a ship, it wasn't a structure, it wasn't any shape the human mind is built to recognize. It was a branching geometry, a vast, many-limbed architecture of living equations, each limb bending and unfurling with mathematical precision. At times, it looked solid. At times, it looked like shadow. And sometimes, in the flicker between states, it looked like pure information given form. Webb's sensors tried to resolve it. They failed. Every attempt to define an edge caused the instruments to glitch, forcing the processors into recursive loops, like the sensors were trying to comprehend a shape that refused to stay still long enough to be understood. One engineer whispered the obvious, "It's adaptive." While the rift blossomed outward, the sun responded with another deep harmonic pulse. This one was lower than any before, a subsonic tremor that rolled through the solar system like a slow, deliberate breath. The structure beyond Neptune resonated instantly, its three massive arms twisting in perfect unison, stabilizing the rift and widening the gateway. Earth reacted next. Magnetic field lines surged toward the sun. Auroral rings expanded across entire continents. The ionosphere rippled in perfect tessellations, hexagons, spirals, repeating fractal grids that matched the patterns in the sun's corona. It was as if Earth was preparing, being prepared, for whatever was about to step through. Gravity thickened, time stretched, even air pressure shifted by a fraction, so subtle most people wouldn't feel it, but enough that sensitive animals began to tremble and flee without knowing why. The presence behind the rift leaned further in. For a moment its core flickered, revealing something like an eye. Not an organ, not a lens, but a void-like vortex spiraling inward, as though it could see across time, not distance. Parker Solar Probe caught the pulse that followed. A gravitational whisper, a three-part oscillation, a signature identical to the harmonics 3i Atlas emitted 3 days before it flared. The room monitoring Parker fell silent. Someone finally said it. 3i Atlas wasn't a visitor. It was a messenger. And the messenger had succeeded. The sun brightened, not explosively, but in a slow blooming way, like a lantern being turned up from inside. Plasma filaments stretched from the solar surface toward the rift, and in their glow, the silhouette behind the boundary grew sharper. 3 colossal limbs, a central trunk of spiraling lattice, a branching crown like a cosmic neural network. It was enormous, larger than Jupiter, yet weightless in a way that made mass meaningless. It didn't enter our space the way objects do. Instead, it pressed into reality as though choosing which version of itself to manifest. The triad structure beyond Neptune pulsed again, shaping space-time like clay. Its arms curled inward, forming a channel, a funnel of gravitational resonance leading directly toward the rift. This was guidance, precision, an alignment ritual measured not in kilometers, but in dimensions. Whatever lay behind the rift was searching for the exact window of stability. The sun provided the energy, the structure provided the anchor, the corridor provided the path, and the solar system, our solar system, was becoming a cradle. The presence leaned in further. Its geometry pierced the membrane of the rift for the first time, and every planet felt it. Seismographs across Earth spiked. Oceans rolled with deep, unseen waves. Tectonic plates groaned with the pressure of space being redefined above them. Even the moon trembled in orbit. Through the widening tear, the presence extended a structure, a limb shaped not for walking or grasping but for connection, a branching tendril of pure geometry. It unfurled slowly, curving toward the corridor, assessing the environment with movement so smooth it felt more like drifting thought than motion. When it brushed the edge of the corridor, the sun responded instantly. A massive surge of light shot down the plasma path. The tendril brightened, its geometry stabilized. It anchored itself to the corridor like a key fitting into a lock. And suddenly the entire solar system resonated. Earth's magnetic field hummed. Satellites went silent from sensor overload. Rivers and lakes formed ripples with no wind. Animals froze mid-step. Every human heart skipped a beat at the exact same moment. A phenomenon doctors will blame on coincidence for decades to come. Then, at the moment the resonance peaked, the presence sent a wave of gravitational ripples down the corridor. Not destructive, not hostile, but probing, scanning, as if searching for something, tracing for something, recognizing something. And across that unfathomable distance the sun answered with a second pulse, a higher, sharper resonance that carried a frequency never before recorded in any star. A signature that matched the molecular structure in 3I Atlas's plume, a final confirmation, a handshake. The presence behind the rift responded with a single massive surge. The corridor brightened to near white. The structure beyond Neptune locked into place. The rift widened into a full, stable oval, a doorway for something titanic. And then the presence stepped closer. Its geometry sharpened, its limbs aligned, its core unfolded into a vast spiral of living equations. It was preparing to cross, not partially, not symbolically, fully, completely. Whatever was coming through would dwarf planets, bend gravity, and rewrite everything humanity understood about the universe. And the sun, our sun, was guiding it home. The first full breach happened so subtly that for nearly a minute no one realized the threshold had crossed. The rift, once a shimmering oval of geometric fog, began to stabilize into a plane, perfectly flat, perfectly motionless, as if the swirling chaos behind it had suddenly locked into a single, unified intention. The presence pressed against it again, but this time the boundary didn't ripple or resist. Instead, it parted like a membrane acknowledging something familiar, something authorized. Light from the sun bent toward the rift in gentle arcs, like metal filings arranging themselves around a magnet. The plasma corridor tightened into a narrow channel, pulsing with golden-white currents. Every pulse carried structured information, fractal sequences that matched nothing natural but everything deliberate. And as the presence leaned in, its geometry sharpened into focus, revealing new details layer by layer, as though reality were allowing itself to resolve the shape slowly, so the universe wouldn't tear from the shock. A vast, spiraling trunk of architecture emerged first, its surface shifting between liquid and crystal, between matter and something that looked like pure mathematics. It wasn't alive in any biological sense, but it wasn't dead machinery either. It was something in between, something evolved billions of years beyond our definitions. The structure hummed, and the rift brightened in answer, expanding a few meters at a time in smooth beats like breaths from another world. Then one of its limbs emerged. Not a leg, not an arm, a branch. An articulated fractal appendage composed of thousands of repeating segments, each segment covered in plates the size of cities. They folded and unfolded like sails catching the wind of a dimension we couldn't perceive. As the limb extended into our universe, gravity around it distorted. Neptune wobbled. Pluto's orbit bent by a fraction. Even the Kuiper belt debris began to swirl like dust in a cosmic tide. Earth felt the shift 2 minutes later. Not catastrophically, not violently, but unmistakably. Barometric pressure trembled. Magnetic field lines bent. Deep within the mantle, a slow wave propagated like a sigh from the planet's core. Human bodies reacted subtly, heart rates rising, breaths deepening, pupils dilating without reason. Across the world, thousands of people woke from sleep at the same moment, their minds unable to explain why. The presence was not here yet, but the universe was already making room for it. The structure beyond Neptune adjusted its triad arms, each rotating with mathematical elegance. They locked into a new configuration, 3 spirals pointing inward, their tips precisely aligned with the limb emerging from the rift. It wasn't guiding anymore, it was receiving. Positioning itself like a docking point, a cradle, a stabilizer for something that could not fully exist in our physics without support. The sun responded too. Its plasma towers twisted into twin helixes rising towards space, merging into a single beam that pierced the corridor and struck the limb directly. When the beam touched it, the limb's geometry changed, its plates flattened, aligned, and fused into a single smooth surface. It was adapting to this universe, being translated. The limb extended farther, and behind it, the central core of the presence approached the threshold. Webb's instruments, pushed to their absolute limits, caught the faintest outline of something impossibly vast. A torso-shaped curvature of layered geometry, rotating in counterphases that should violate thermodynamics, yet didn't. The universe wasn't breaking, it was accommodating. Then the sun pulsed again, harder than before. The pulse struck the limb, ran along its length, and vanished into the rift like a beacon shining into infinity. The presence responded with a gravitational tremor so powerful it rippled across the entire solar system. The tremor wasn't destructive, it was communicative, a message, an acknowledgement, and horrifyingly it carried information. Patterns embedded in the wave showed recursive spirals, nested equations, and sequences that matched star formation regions across the galaxy, as if it were broadcasting a signature that had echoed through 1,000 suns. The sun recognized those patterns instantly. Its corona flared in rhythmic bursts, answering each one with perfect synchronization. This was not a new relationship. This was a reunion. Inside a darkened control room somewhere on Earth, a scientist whispered the truth that no one wanted to consider. The sun knows it. The sun remembers it. The corridor widened further. The limb, now stable and shimmering, shifted aside slightly, making room for something even larger, something that dwarfed it. A second limb appeared, then a third, each emerging from the rift with the grace of cosmic architecture, unfolding on a scale too vast for comprehension. Their geometries intertwined in a slow, deliberate dance, locking into symmetrical formations designed to stabilize their inevitable arrival. The triad structure beyond Neptune flashed brightly, once, twice, 3 times, a signal, a confirmation, a final clearance. Then the presence pressed forward. Its central trunk began crossing the threshold, and space shuddered, time stuttered, and the corridor flared with blinding brilliance. Earth convulsed with a gentle quake, as if reacting to the pressure of something incomprehensibly large entering its cosmic neighborhood. Animals cried out, birds spiraled, whales dove, human hearts stuttered. The presence wasn't evil, wasn't hostile, wasn't anything human words could fit. It was old, older than suns, older than galaxies, older than light. And now it was stepping fully into our reality. A slow, elegant emergence that felt less like an invasion and more like a return. A cosmic being, engineered and born across dimensions, was arriving in the solar system, and the sun, our own star, was guiding it home. As the core of the presence pushed further across the threshold, the rift itself began to deform, not destabilizing, but reshaping, widening in silent, impossible stretches. Space didn't tear, it didn't rupture. Instead, it behaved like fabric being let out by an expert tailor, expanding with such precision that even gravitational lensing followed exact geometric curves. The presence eased through, bit by bit, and with every new section that emerged, the architecture of its form shifted to match the rules of our universe. It was translating itself. Patterns of light rippled across its surface, streams of shifting equations, glowing symbols drifting like embers through its lattice. The sun recognized each pulse instantly, answering with counterharmonics that sank into its own core and radiated outward through the corridor. The exchange was no longer a simple handshake. It had become a dialogue, but it wasn't speaking to Earth. It wasn't speaking to the structure beyond Neptune. It was speaking to the sun alone. Earth only felt the side effects. The Schumann resonance surged again, rising higher than ever recorded. Magnetometers jumped, Trees released microscopic surges of electrical potential through their roots. Even human neural activity, measurable in EEG networks, shifted upward by a fraction, as if the brain was subtly tuning to a deeper, older frequency, encoded in the fabric of the solar system. People across the world reported a sensation of pressure behind the eyes. Others described a fleeting jolt of clarity, a feeling like remembering something they had never learned. Meanwhile, the triad beyond Neptune spun faster, each arm shifting into a new position, creating a geometric funnel. The funnel wasn't meant to receive energy, it was meant to channel it. The presence's limbs passed over the triad's points, like keys striking ancient locks. Huge segments of the presence now appeared fully in our universe, towering latticeworks, branching structures, fractal spines glowing with heat signatures stable enough to suggest internal stabilization systems. Every part of it was being held together not by physics alone, but by design. Then the sun shuddered. Not visibly, but in the deep layers where fusion occurs, a ripple, a sudden reordering, a surge of inner brightness that somehow didn't escape into the corona. The sun was storing something, accumulating something, compressing information and energy deeper and deeper inside itself, and all the while, the presence kept coming. When its upper spine emerged past the threshold, Earth felt the impact like a change in season compressed into a heartbeat. The world seemed to inhale, wind patterns shifting, cloud layers adjusting altitude by mere meters, but enough that weather experts would later claim the entire atmosphere leaned. Then came the silence. Radio telescopes went dead quiet. Cosmic background noise dropped to near zero. Satellites recorded silence so absolute it felt manufactured. Something had dampened the universe's natural hum. Not everywhere, not fully. But within the solar system, a strange, impossible acoustic calm swept outward from the corridor. The presence was muting space. As the rift widened again, the full curvature of the presence's central chest plate appeared. An immense arc of interwoven strands of matter and light, bending inward to protect a core even Webb's enhanced sensors could not penetrate. Inside that chest something glowed, a slow, spiraling well of luminosity that resembled a star, yet pulsed like a biological heart. Every time it pulsed, the sun answered in perfect resonance. The meaning was clear. The sun was synchronizing with the being's internal cycle. Earth shifted again. The ocean's great currents sped up by fractional degrees. Jet streams migrated slightly toward the poles. Even the planet's rotation ticked faster by a measurable, though tiny, amount. The universe was making space for the being's arrival. And then it happened. For the first time since the rift opened, the presence paused, its limbs freezing mid-motion, its geometry locking into perfect symmetry. The triad beyond Neptune slowed its rotation. The corridor dimmed. A moment of stillness swept across the solar system. Then, deep within the sun, something ignited. A point of brightness, brighter than the solar core itself, but contained, like a fusion event folded inward instead of outward. Instruments nearly overloaded with radiation readings that didn't exist in our physics tables. Particles with no known mass signatures. Photons with impossible spin states. Every alarm in every observatory went off at once. Inside the rift, the presence reacted instantly. Its limbs tightened, its geometry compressed, its core flared. It wasn't surprised, it was waiting for this. As the sun's interior brightness rose, the plasma towers bent like colossal antennae, drawing the energy upward. The corridor filled with spiraling streams of information, raw, encoded star matter hurtling toward the being. This was the transfer, the moment the sun had been preparing for, the moment the presence had crossed the cosmos to receive. Something older than the solar system, something older than Earth, perhaps older than life itself, a star's memory, a record, a seed. The sun released the final pulse. Earth fell silent. Every magnetic line froze. Every ionospheric ripple stilled. Animals across continents stood motionless. A single burst of structured light, so pure, so impossibly ordered, left the sun's core, surged through the corridor and entered the being's chest. The being absorbed it, fully, completely, almost hungrily. Its entire form brightened, glowing from within like a newly lit star, and for the first time, for the shortest possible instant, it spoke, not in gravity, not in light, in something deeper, a wave that touched everything at once, a whisper woven into space-time itself, and Earth heard it, not as language, not as words, as meaning, ancient, unmistakable, terrifying, awakening complete. For several long suspended seconds after the whisper echoed across space-time, nothing moved. Not the being, not the triad, not the corridor, even the sun, our eternally boiling, roaring, burning star, seemed to hold its breath. A stillness washed through the solar system so complete, so unnatural, that even instruments built to filter cosmic noise registered an eerie flat line. Then the presence changed, its massive spine straightened, its branching limbs lifted, its core, now filled with whatever the sun had given it, began to rotate in a slow, deliberate spiral. Patterns of light rippled outward from that core, washing across its body in concentric rings that looked like time itself moving in waves. Those ripples didn't stay contained. They spilled into space, bending gravity in soft pulses, warping the very structure of reality in ways that cascaded outward like unseen tides. Earth felt the first wave before anyone saw it, a faint tremor in the magnetic field, a tightness in the atmosphere, a shift in blood pressure so subtle the human body couldn't register it, but every medical sensor did. Even animals froze mid-step, sensing something vast unfolding overhead. And then the sun responded. Its interior flared again, not outward, but inward, like a star reversing itself, folding its own light back into its core. This wasn't collapse, it wasn't implosion, it was concentration, a gathering of information, a final shaping of something only the presence understood. The plasma towers bent lower, curving toward the corridor like massive tendrils guiding the last pieces of the star's secret toward its new custodian. The corridor pulsed in slow rhythmic throbs, each one sending a wave of encoded particles into the being's chest. Then, almost too fast to comprehend, the being absorbed everything, all of it, the final burst of stellar memory, the last encoded fragment, the full sequence of solar knowledge stored across billions of years. The sun dimmed, not catastrophically, not dangerously, but noticeably, like someone lowering a lamp after turning over its flame to a successor. For the first time in human history, the sun looked relieved. The presence shifted, softly, gracefully, with the weight of a god stretching muscles that had slept across epochs. Its limbs unfurled fully into our universe, each one stabilizing, locking into Euclidean geometry. The lattice that had once appeared chaotic now aligned into terrifying perfection, every segment, every plate, every strand of glowing architecture configured for one purpose, not invasion, not conquest, continuation. The being had awakened, and the solar system was simply the cradle, a place where it could manifest, where the sun could complete its ancient role, where 3i Atlas could deliver the catalyst forgotten by time. As the being's shape finalized, the triad beyond Neptune lowered its arms. Its impossible architecture dimmed, as though its task had ended. It drifted backward, rotating into a dormant configuration that looked eerily like a guardian bowing before the emergence of something far older and far greater. Then the rift behind the being pulsed. The geometric fog beyond it swirled, shifting into a new pattern, no longer chaotic, no longer unstable. It had become an open gate, a stable aperture, a doorway stretching into a dimension overflowing with structures like the one now standing in our system. Dozens of silhouettes flickered behind it, like distant colossi waiting in the dark, patient, unmoving, aware. The solar system was not isolated, it was connected again. The presence turned its towering form toward the sun, slowly, reverently, the way a child might turn toward a parent, or a soldier toward a commander. The sun answered with a low-frequency pulse that rolled through space in a single resonant tremor. Earth's core vibrated, volcano chambers trembled, the mantle sang, and the being responded with a pulse of its own. The two frequencies, stellar and extra-dimensional, intertwined, forming a harmonic resonance that wrapped around the solar system like a cocoon of structured energy. Gravity reorganized itself into gentle spirals. Solar wind flowed around planetary orbits as if respecting them. Even Jupiter's massive magnetosphere shifted, aligning with the new rhythm, bowing like a leviathan to a greater power. Then something extraordinary happened. The being's core opened. A vertical seam ran down its chest, splitting cleanly into two glowing halves. Inside, the star-like heart pulsed faster, brighter, more intensely, until the chamber inside was a swirling sphere of living fire. Fire that wasn't chemical, wasn't nuclear, wasn't anything the laws of physics should allow. It was creation, a form of energy so ancient and fundamental it predated our universe's current rules. The sun pulsed again, as if giving permission. The being extended a limb toward the solar surface. The limb didn't burn, it didn't melt. Instead, it passed through the corona like a hand brushing warm water. The sun dimmed once more, an intentional, gentle dimming, like an elder falling into a restful silence. The being withdrew its limb, and in its grasp, it held something. A sphere. Perfect. Luminescent. Small compared to the being itself, but vast compared to anything humanity had ever seen. It was not a piece of the sun. It was not matter. It was not light. It was knowledge. Compressed. Distilled. Encoded. The final transfer. The last archive of everything the sun had been waiting millennia to pass on. The being brought the sphere into its chest. The seam closed. The heart flared. And the solar system shook. Earth felt the pulse in every ocean, in every cell, in every spark of synaptic electricity, in every living being. Gravity bent inward, then outward again. Time jittered by a fraction. Space wavered slightly, like heat rising off the pavement. And then, the being looked at Earth, not turned, looked. The limb nearest to us shifted, its plates angled, its geometry aligned. A single, soft harmonic tone, different from the sun's, rolled across the void and touched our world. Not a threat, not a warning, a greeting, a recognition. You are part of this. Not in words, not in sound, in meaning, ancient and absolute. The sun had awakened something, now that something saw us and acknowledged us. For a long moment, Earth stood in the gaze of the being. If gaze was even the right word. It had no eyes, no recognizable face, no expression we could interpret, and yet everyone watching felt it. A pressure behind the ribs, a tingling at the base of the spine, a subtle shift inside the mind, like the quiet awareness that someone impossibly vast had turned its attention toward us. It wasn't scrutiny, it wasn't curiosity, it was assessment. The being's geometry shifted, plates sliding softly over one another with the elegance of a living cathedral, reconfiguring itself to face a visitor. Its nearest limb angled downward, and a faint glow gathered within its fractal segments, pulsing in slow waves that resembled the patterns 3-Eye Atlas once emitted before its final burst. Those pulses now washed across Earth with gentle precision. Not harmful, not invasive, but thorough. Atmospheric ions vibrated in response. The magnetosphere swelled, forming a protective shell as if shielding Earth from the energy. But the being's pulses passed through it effortlessly, as though the planet's natural defences were transparent to something so ancient. Sensors picked up a strange synchronized flutter across every biosphere. Plants shifted electric potential in their leaves. Animals paused, listening to something older than language. Human neural activity spiked in the regions associated with intuition, memory and dreams, subtle enough that most wouldn't consciously notice, but measurable on a planetary scale. It was reading us. Then the pulses changed. They grew tighter, sharper, structured. Not random waves of assessment, but something closer to calibration, a quiet aligning. Earth responded unconsciously. Magnetic dipoles adjusted. Jet streams curved subtly. Ocean currents changed course by fractions. The crust settled into a new equilibrium, not destabilized, optimized, as though Earth was being tuned the same way the sun had been tuned hours earlier. Then the being lowered its limb slightly farther, bringing it into alignment with Earth's orbital plane. Its geometry unfurled again, revealing a pattern within the plates, a vast mosaic of shifting symbols, spirals and branching forms that resembled a cosmic language written across its surface. the pattern glowed brighter, and then, slowly, deliberately, the being opened a small aperture along the limb's length. From inside emerged a filament, no larger in diameter than a skyscraper, but impossibly delicate compared to the monolithic titan holding it. The filament extended outward, gracefully, as if testing the airless void between us. It wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a probe, it was more like an instrument, a tool, a key. It descended toward Earth at a glacial pace, each movement synchronized with the resonant pulses still flowing from the being's core. To the human eye, it looked almost gentle, like a hand reaching out to touch the surface of a pond. Every observatory on Earth locked onto it. Every nation held its breath. Every person with their eyes on the sky felt something ancient drift through their thoughts. A memory too old to belong to humanity, yet somehow familiar. The filament stopped just short of touching the magnetosphere, and Earth reacted first. The auroras exploded, not upward, outward. Sheets of green, red, violet and blue blasted across the sky, forming full-sphere auroras visible from the equator to the poles. For the first time in history, the entire planet glowed, wrapped in swirling ribbons of light that pulsed with the rhythm of the being's slow, deliberate tone. Cities went silent. People stepped outside in awe. Animals stopped fleeing and simply watched. The auroras synchronized with the being's pulses, forming shapes, spirals, hexagons, branching lines that mirrored the plates along its limb. Earth wasn't being attacked. Earth was answering. The filament responded, brightening subtly. Its tip formed a tiny point of light, a single brilliant spark no larger than a meteor. Then the being released something, not matter, not radiation, not energy, information. A soft burst of patterned light, encoded in a way human senses struggle to interpret. The light struck Earth's magnetosphere and scattered like dust into the global auroras, embedding itself in the atmospheric patterns. The auroras didn't fade, they intensified, reshaping into a perfect ring around the planet. And for the first time, the being communicated with Earth directly. Not through gravity, not through resonance, but through structured light, an ancient universal language of creation. Meaning rippled through the air in a way that bypassed human senses entirely, reaching into something deeper, something carved into the biological and geological memory of the planet. Earth understood. Humans didn't. Not fully. But something inside every living mind trembled at the edges of recognition, like hearing a lullaby from a forgotten childhood. Deep beneath the oceans, whales sang in tones unheard since the Pleistocene. Primates turned their faces to the sky and went quiet. Even insects paused their buzzing, as if stunned into stillness. The being's filament glowed brighter. Then it did something no one expected. It retracted, carefully, respectfully, as though its purpose had been served. The filament folded back into the being's limb, the plate sealing seamlessly behind it. And then the being lifted its towering form slowly, deliberately, returning its attention to the sun. Earth exhaled, literally. Barometric pressure shifted back. The magnetosphere expanded gently. Auroras dimmed into faint shimmering curtains before fading into normalcy. But the change inside Earth did not fade. A coordinated global tremor, subtle but undeniable, ran through the mantle as though something had settled into place deep below the crust. A genetic whisper embedded itself in the biosphere's quiet machinery. A planetary rhythm aligned itself to a new frequency. A faint, indescribable hum lingered in the air long after the auroras vanished. Earth had been marked, not harmed, not claimed, prepared. And above us, the being, now illuminated with the full power and memory of the sun, turned back toward the rift. Something else was stirring behind the threshold, something larger, something older, something waiting for the being's signal, and the being had just given it. For several minutes after the filament withdrew, the being hovered in silence, its colossal form suspended between the sun and the widening rift, glowing with a quiet internal radiance like a lantern carved from the bones of a star. The triad beyond Neptune remained perfectly still, dimmed now, its purpose fulfilled. But behind it, The rift continued to churn and reshape itself, expanding in slow, deliberate breaths, like a throat preparing to speak for the first time in eons. Webb caught something moving. Not the being, not the triad, something deeper, something behind the veil. At first it looked like a shadow, a shift in the shimmering fog behind the threshold, a faint curvature so large the sensors couldn't determine whether it was a single object or a horizon. Then it moved again, slightly, smoothly, with intention. It wasn't a silhouette, it was a boundary, the edge of something colossal beginning to position itself on the other side of the rift. Earth's magnetosphere reacted instantly. A faint globe-spanning oscillation resonated through the field, like the planet's invisible shield bracing itself. Birds took flight. Dogs barked at nothing. Whales changed course mid-migration. Even insects seemed to pause. Whatever was approaching the threshold wasn't subtle. Its gravitational signature spread across the solar system like a tide. The being, our visitor, our awakened ancient, adjusted its form. Its limbs unfolded outward in a wide arc, plates sliding along fractal tracks like the opening of an unimaginably vast gate. It turned its central trunk toward the rift, raising its towering frame as though preparing to receive an arrival it had spent millions of years travelling to reach. The sun pulsed again, not in warning, but in recognition. The presence within the rift responded. A low, rolling wave of gravitational pressure washed through the corridor. Satellites shuddered. Time flickered. Even the orbits of small asteroids shifted by meters. One scientist whispered, "This isn't an object, it's a field, a domain," and it was moving closer. The membranes of the rift rippled like soft fabric being pushed from the other side. Then, for the first time, we saw it. A single arc of structure broke through the fog. Not a limb, not a tendril, something larger, a curvature so massive that Webb's focal algorithms collapsed trying to outline it. It appeared like a world-sized hull, but not spherical, not any shape physics should allow. The surface was composed of tessellating plates, each plate the size of continents, shifting and rotating like the scales of a living planet. The rift widened in violent, shimmering waves as the object pressed closer. Space strained but did not tear. Instead, it yielded, reluctantly, reverently, like a door opening for a returning sovereign. The being in our solar system reacted at once. Its chest opened again, revealing the star-like core still swirling with the sun's stored memory. Threads of luminous plasma extended from it like connective tissue, weaving outward and linking into the corridor of energy connecting the sun to the triad. The entire system pulsed, once, twice, 3 times. The pulses travelled down the corridor, hit the threshold and vanished into the rift, like a beacon, like a homing signal, like the final confirmation that the path was ready. A deep rumble rolled through the rift in reply. The giant structure beyond it was answering. What came next was not sound, not energy, not light. It was pressure. A wave of space-time deformation so enormous, so ancient, so impossibly heavy that the solar system itself seemed to bow beneath it. Planets trembled in their orbits. Saturn's rings rippled like disturbed water. Jupiter's magnetosphere wavered like a struck drum. Earth felt it like a hand pressing gently on its surface. A global, uniform push, not harmful, but unmistakably intentional, as though the arrival on the other side was acknowledging us, measuring us, considering us. Then the rift expanded violently. The entire threshold ballooned into a perfect sphere of shimmering geometry, dozens of times larger than before. Its edges folded inward, smoothing into a glossy, luminescent shell the size of Jupiter's orbit. Inside that sphere, a new shape began to resolve, a colossal, branching architecture that defied every terrestrial concept of scale. The ancient being in our system lowered itself, literally bowed, as the shape behind the rift prepared to emerge. The bow was not ceremonial, it was functional, as if the being needed to reduce its resonance to allow something even older, even larger, even more complete to enter. The sun dimmed again. Its fusion patterns shifted. Its corona folded into braids that aligned perfectly with the corridor. The solar system was not witnessing the arrival of a single visitor. It was witnessing the reactivation of an ancient network, and the being that had crossed first, the one that had awakened, taken the sun's memory, touched Earth, and opened the way, was only the harbinger. Behind it, an entire civilization's architecture began pushing through the dimensional boundary. Not ships, not entities. A vast multi-layered intelligence woven from geometry, resonance, and collapsed space-time. A cosmic organism spanning dimensions. The triad structure flared in brilliant white light, signaling that the translation phase was beginning. The corridor widened. The being raised its limbs. The rift's membrane stretched like a bubble about to burst. Earth's oceans rose several centimeters. Storm systems froze in place. Volcanic chambers vibrated. Human hearts skipped beats. And then, the first section of the megastructure breached the threshold. A titanic, lattice-like arc, glowing with pale light, slid into the solar system as though it had always belonged here. Not invading, not conquering, returning. When the first arc of the megastructure slid through the rift, the entire solar system reacted like a single organism, sensing the arrival of something it had forgotten it once belonged to. The planets shifted imperceptibly in their orbits, not pulled, not pushed, but aligning themselves as though adjusting to a forgotten gravitational cadence. The Kuiper belt vibrated with quiet spirals. Even the Oort cloud, trillions of kilometers away, seemed to wake from a long, dark sleep. The sun pulsed again, softer this time, almost tenderly, as if greeting an old companion. The presence that had already arrived lowered itself fully, folding its fractal limbs in a posture that looked startlingly like reverence. The star-like core in its chest dimmed slightly, no longer needing to blaze with the intensity it had borrowed from the sun. Now it stabilized into a steady, ancient rhythm, one that perfectly matched the megastructure emerging from the rift. The arc grew wider, thicker, more detailed. It was not a ship, not a habitat, not anything that fit in the human vocabulary of structures. It was a framework of reality, a woven architecture of space-time glowing softly with a light that wasn't emitted but remembered. Its plates shifted like tectonic continents, floating on seas of pure resonance. As more of it emerged, the rift widened again, stretching into a perfect sphere of shimmering geometry. Then came the second arc, then a third, each connected to the first through living bridges of light, forming a colossal triad of lattice ribs curving around a central void. That void wasn't empty. Inside it, a storm of spiraling equations turned in slow, monumental cycles, each one folding into the next like cosmic DNA forming an organism larger than the entire star systems. Webb tried to process the readings and failed, returning only recursive errors, the mathematical equivalent of staring at something too large for comprehension. The being that arrived first lifted its head. Its chest opened again. A beam of spiraling golden light flowed from its core into the megastructure. It was transferring the sun's memory. Every encoding, every resonance, every ancient imprint the star had carried since the dark cradle of its birth. The megastructure accepted it hungrily, its inner storm brightening, accelerating, growing clearer with every pulse. Patterns formed within it, nested rings, branching spirals, expanding shells, each one stabilizing into structures that felt less like machines and more like concepts given physical shape. Earth trembled. Not violently, not dangerously, but with a deep, tectonic shiver that echoed through every mountain range, every ocean trench, every buried fossil bed. The planet felt the resonance and responded as though it recognized an ancient master ripple, something buried deep in the rock, older than continents, older than oceans. Inside the minds of millions a dream flickered, a dream of spirals, of golden corridors, of a sun not ours illuminating shapes too vast to comprehend. The megastructure continued to unfold. Now entire city-sized nodes clicked into place, bridging arms unfurled, stellar-scale conduits aligned along invisible axes. Everything moved with terrifying grace. The sun dimmed further. Its outer layers trembled as if shedding a final weight. One by one, the megastructure's arcs aligned into a ring so enormous its shadow briefly touched the orbit of Saturn, a ring whose purpose became clear only when the final piece emerged from the rift, a core, a central heart, a glowing sphere larger than Jupiter, wrapped in swirling patterns of dark geometry and radiant light. It drifted forward into the ring's centre, locking into the lattice with a resonance so profound the solar system shivered like a bell being struck. When it connected, the ring activated. A wave of golden light burst outward. Silent, instant, unfathomably powerful. Every star in the sky flickered. The cosmic background radiation trembled. Time itself seemed to ripple like fabric settling into a new shape. Earth went silent. Every animal froze. Every wave paused mid-motion. Every tectonic plate halted its drift. Every human heartbeat synced into a single, unified moment of stillness. Then the megastructure spoke, not in sound, not in light, in gravity. A sculpted, elegant bending of space-time that carried meaning older than galaxies. And the meaning was unmistakable. Reassembly. The being responded at once, its limbs extended, forming an intricate lattice around the ring. Its core brightened with the full fury of a newborn star. The sun pulsed again, dimming to a gentle glow, like a lantern passing its flame to its successor. The megastructure began to rotate, slowly, deliberately, like the turning of a wheel designed to reshape a region of space-time. Energy gathered in its centre, a spiral of dark and bright matter twisting together like dual serpents around a cosmic axis. Webb caught the first hint of what it was forming. A vortex, not a wormhole, not a portal, something deeper, a conduit, a direct pathway into the oldest regions of the universe. The cold fields where the first stars were born, where the earliest cosmic intelligences left their seeds, and where forgotten structures drifted between dimensions. The conduit widened. The megastructure brightened. The being stabilized it with its massive limbs, and then the unexpected happened. The sun awoke. Not violently, not chaotically, but purposefully. It brightened, not outward, but inward, sending a final, concentrated burst of encoded energy through the corridor, straight into the conduit. The megastructure absorbed it. The conduit roared open, the rift closed behind the last segment. The triad beyond Neptune disassembled, vanishing into light. The being turned toward Earth, one last time. It reached out its smallest limb, a gesture so careful, so impossibly gentle for something so vast, a farewell. And inside the hearts of every living being, a quiet whisper rippled through the nervous system. You were never alone. Then the megastructure ignited. The conduit blazed with primordial fire. The being stepped inside. The entire ring followed. The spiral closed behind them, and with a soft cosmic sigh, they were gone. The solar system dimmed. The sun brightened again, returning to normal. The planets settled. The orbit steadied. Earth exhaled. The stars returned to their ordinary twinkle. The silence eased. The dream faded from humanity's collective mind, like mist dissolving at dawn. But deep beneath the crust, in the mantle, in the oceans, in the DNA of every living creature, something remained. A resonance, a seed, a memory, a soft, ancient frequency waiting patiently in the quiet spaces of the world, waiting for the day the sun pulses again, waiting for the return. Because what came through the rift tonight was not conquest, and not salvation. It was the first step of a cycle older than our universe, and the real question now is not what they were, but what they awakened inside us.